Have you ever walked into a core or church and felt like you were stepping back in time? And I don't mean that in a good way. There's a subtle shift that can happen in a church or a core. It's not a sudden crisis, but a slow, quiet fade. The energy that once fueled risky, life-changing ministry now gets spent just preserving its own history. The focus drifts from the people you're trying to reach to the preferences of the people you've already got. A creeping nostalgia sets in, and suddenly the past is the hero of every single story. This forces every church leader and committed member to ask a terrifying question. Are we curating a museum, or are we fueling a mission? Are we called to be guides of the past, or soldiers for the future? A church is supposed to be a living, breathing movement, not a mausoleum of tradition. But the line between revering history and being embalmed by it is dangerously thin. So let's break down 5 signs that your church or core might be more of a museum than a movement, and talk about what it takes to get back on mission. All right, the first and maybe the most painfully obvious sign is all about the budget. Just follow the money. A church on a mission asks, where is God calling us to go? And the budget is the fuel to get there. A church that's a museum asks, what will it take to keep the lights on and the building from falling apart? In a museum church, the vast majority of the budget flows inwards. It's spent on staff, on buildings and facilities, and on programs designed to keep existing members perfectly comfortable. There's little to no money for risk, for bold new outreach, or for any significant investment in the actual community surrounding the building. When your budget meetings are dominated by conversations about maintenance and preservation instead of mission and multiplication, it's a clear sign that you're functioning as a curator, not a missionary. When pounds are valued more than disciples, you're not funding a mission, you're funding a social club. Sign number 2. The past is the undisputed hero of every story. Listen to the stories that people tell. In a missional church, they're buzzing about recent life change, what God is doing right now. But in a museum church, it's all about the glory days. Every conversation seems to drift back to, remember when, or back in our heyday, or the army isn't what it used to be. This isn't just harmless nostalgia. It's a sign that the church has stopped dreaming and has lost its vision for the future. When the highlight reel is 60 years old, it means that no new highlights are being made. A church sent by God is always looking forward to what God will do next. A museum, by its very definition, is focused on what's already been done. When a church would rather die than change, it usually gets its wish. This brings us to sign number 3. Your members act more like guards than guides. Think about how new people are treated. In a missional church, newcomers are seen as the entire point. Members act as guides, intentionally connecting with visitors and helping them find their place in the mission. But in a museum church, members often behave like guards protecting the exhibits. They might be friendly enough to each other, but they ignore people they don't recognize. Visitors are welcome to look, but they're subtly expected not to touch anything. They accidentally sit in someone's chair. They don't know the unwritten rules. Their new ideas aren't seen as fresh perspectives, but as threats to sacred traditions. When the comfort of the insiders consistently wins out over the welcome of the outsiders, you're not running a hospital for the broken. You're guarding the relics of the comfortable. You know the unwritten rule of any museum. Do not touch the displays. Sign number 4 is when that same rule applies to your church's methods, styles, and programs. Any suggestion for change is met with the 7 last words of a dying church. We've never done it that way before. Missional churches are constantly adapting to better reach their community. They understand that while the core message never changes, methods absolutely must. A museum church, however, is terrified of the future and clings to the past. It prioritizes preserving traditions, even the totally ineffective ones, over taking the necessary risks to reach a new generation. It would rather be faithful to its methods than fruitful in its mission. And the final sign, number 5, is all about what you celebrate. What are the wins that get the spotlight on a Sunday morning? In a museum church, the big celebrations are about maintenance. We've balanced the budget. We finally repaired the roof. It's our 140th anniversary. Now, these things aren't bad things to celebrate, but if they're the only things you celebrate, then it's a huge red flag. A missional church is obsessed with life change. It celebrates when someone makes a commitment to God. It tells stories of people serving the poor, of marriages being healed, and of community members finding faith. The scoreboard isn't just attendance numbers and budget surpluses. It's transformed lives. When a full building is celebrated more than a fulfilled mission, it's a sure sign that past blessings have bred present complacency. So, let's recap. The budget is for curators. The past is the hero, members are guards, innovation is feared, and you celebrate maintenance over ministry. Look, if any of this feels a little too close to home, then don't be discouraged. This diagnosis isn't a death sentence, it's a wake-up call. It's an invitation from God to move from being a graveyard of yesteryear to being a living, breathing movement once again. It begins when leaders and members get gut-level honest and ask, what is God up to in our town? And how can we get in on it? What are your thoughts? Have you seen these signs in a core or church? Drop a comment below. I'd genuinely love to hear your story. And if this was helpful, subscribe for more content to help you lead a church that is truly on mission. I'm Rob Westwood-Payne, and this has been the Battle Drill Daily Devotional.